this lesson, we're going to look at some ways to use an inkjet transfer to make a print. Now, I've done a lot of research on this and I've done loads of experimenting, and it's hard to get this to work in lots of different cases. But what I'm going to show you is foolproof, and ever since I put this particular combination together, it has worked like clockwork. So the first tip is really related to the paper. Typical standard copy paper will not work for this technique. And so what I finally found is this paper, which is, and this was listed on the supply list, but it's a professional business paper. It's good for laser and inkjet. And the trick to the paper is that it has a shiny surface and it's two-sided. So literally it could be reused, which is good news. This is not photo paper. Photo paper will wreck your gel plate. I have not experienced it myself because I've watched a lot of videos, so I know from other people's sad tales of woe that they have tried using photo paper on the plate and the paper bonded to something in the plate and they could never get it off. I've had problems with things sticking to the plate, paper, and let's see, you saw in one of the early lessons where I had a total snafu. But I've always been able to wash that paper off in situations like that. And I'm not going to find out the hard way about photo paper. I'm going to respect those who come before me, and I want to share that with you. So, point well made, I hope, that you're looking for this sort of a paper, but not a photo paper per se. Now, I did not print this on a laser printer, even though I could. I have not had great success with laser prints. Looks to me as though that technology is also a little bit complex and hit and miss. So I'll be working on that, and when I can perfect that enough to stand behind it, I'll teach it in another class. But right now we're focusing on the inkjet printer, which many of us already have, which is the good news. The other disclaimer is that this will not work with color prints. So you can try a color print if you want to, but it will print, oddly enough, as black and white, which makes me think that the black ink on the inkjet printer is what's transferring here and not the colors. So what I have done with this paper is to print this black and white alphabet on the inkjet printer. I've used the black setting, and so this is very clean. You see how much detail it has. Here's the drill. Once I have this created, I go to a clean jelly plate and I lay down the copy with the ink side down, of course. Okay, once I put this down, I smooth it to make sure there are no air bubbles. And now I'm going to leave this here for at least an hour. You can leave it longer than an hour. You can try it a little earlier than an hour, but in my experience, an hour is pretty much the minimum amount of time I would want to leave it on the clean plate. So this is something about how the mineral oil and the synthetic whatever it is polymer in the plate absorbs the ink from the inkjet onto the plate temporarily, and then I will be able to lift it with a coat of acrylic paint. So one right here has already been on this surface for a couple of hours. So now I'm going to peel this back. To reveal the alphabet. And I'm going to pull this over a little bit so I don't have that dirt or that paint under there, so you can see it a little bit better. I know it's upside down. Well, let me turn it around. Now, once I have this transfer on the plate, I want to transfer it right away. I have had the experience of being called away once this was already set up like this. And when I went back to it the next day, it wouldn't transfer. I could wash it off so I could remove it, but I couldn't get it to transfer to another surface. So just keep that in mind. And then I flattened this out. You could put it under books. I've got a heat press, so I just put it in the press and close it overnight, because then I can run this side through and put something on this side to reuse this piece of paper. Okay, now essentially, in order to transfer this, which could go onto paper or fabric, I'm going to put it on paper because it's a little bit quicker for a demo. I've talked you through the fact that when I put it on fabric, I would have to leave it until it dried completely. That's true with this transfer technique too. But when I put it on paper, I have a shorter window of time that I have to wait. And so that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to use a piece of this drawing paper that I've had good luck with. And let's see, what color shall I do? I guess I'll do a pale pink. I'm sort of in love with this pink. So get some pink. Spread it over the transfer area. And get it nice and smooth. Put the paper down. Smooth it with your hand. And of course, when we're smoothing, we're ensuring that we're making contact, and we're also making sure there are no air bubbles. And then I'm going to leave this here so that the ink has a chance to transfer back into the paint. And then I will pull the print so that you can see what it looks like. Okay, so I just had an interesting little discovery. I was going to pull this, which I just put down. There's been no delay time. I just put this down. I was just going to pull it off to get rid of it because I just told you it needed to be on here for an hour, and check it out. I was wrong. I love it when I'm wrong on camera and I can show you that I was wrong because, well, maybe I'm partially wrong. It did transfer. And aside from right down here where I've got an issue, I think the reason I had that issue is probably because when I put it down and started smoothing it, I didn't smooth it right there because it's completely perfect everywhere else. And that was a matter of 10 minutes, maybe even shorter than 10 minutes. So that shows you that you've got a little wiggle room here and you can play around. And it's also such a great lesson in sometimes questioning what you've been told in case there's another way to do it. Okay, I've waited about 15 minutes for this inkjet transfer paint, the pink that was behind it, to dry. I think I'm ready to peel that off. So let's have a look. Great. Nice, that worked out really beautifully. Remember the variations on the theme. I could change out the colors so I had more of a blending in the background. If I wanted to use this as collage, since I can't use a colored inkjet print, I could come back with maybe the opaque acrylic markers that I showed you on the plate, or I could get colored pencil and work into this now. I could put this on fabric and then I could stitch these. So there are a lot of opportunities, and it doesn't just need to be lettering, of course. I'm probably going to transfer the one on this side onto fabric, and maybe I'll show you that later since it takes, a long time for it to dry. But if I put it on fabric, then I'd have some additional possibilities. Now, I do want you to realize that you can't come onto this surface right now and hand color individually. I couldn't introduce thinned acrylic paint and paint into these shapes while they're on, or these letters while they're on the plate, because it's still an inkjet transfer and it'll wash it right off. It'll bleed. So that's not compatible right now with this particular process that I'm showing you. But there are definitely some other options. And let me show you a print I did using this technique. Okay, on this collage, which is on one piece of paper, I started with the print that you see that has the beige background, and that is the oil pastel, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I did that first, and then I introduced the map that you see in the background here. It's a kind of a, well, what's it say? It's a sun chart, actually. And then once the sun chart was in place, and I used the matte medium to put the sun chart down so it didn't introduce any color. That kept it transparent. And then I introduced my crocus. So the crocus was an element that was separate from the sun chart, but I did the same thing to transfer the crocus from the plate. I used the matte medium since it was clear, and that's how I was able to layer these images over each other, but also to layer them over this drawing of the flower. And then in the last week, I'll show you how to treat paper to make it flexible so that you can use it almost like cloth. And this little piece of Texas map was done with that particular technique. So there's more to come on this particular piece. That's what I've got up to this point, but I wanted to show you the use of the inkjet transfer so that you could see how it looks when you're actually putting it into practice. So lots of collage possibilities ahead of you in your future with these techniques. And remember, you can get this sort of very, very fine detail using these inkjet transfers on the plate, which is quite different from the other effects that you get. Of course, you can get text from a magazine page, but in this case, you really have more control over the design elements you're incorporating. So it can be fairly heavy, blocky elements, or it can be something as detailed as my sun chart, and you'll still succeed. It's pretty great. I want to see what you're going to do.